Hello, everyone. What would you do if your neighbor started digging a hole in his backyard at 1 a.m.? Or if the quiet boys next door handed you a real gun, then showed up at your window in the middle of the night? Sometimes, the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters. They're the people living right next to you. Tonight, 2 stories, 2 neighborhoods, and 2 secrets that were never meant to be discovered. It's hard to explain how something so quiet, so ordinary, can feel so wrong. I live in a peaceful neighborhood just outside Willow Creek, Oregon. Rows of trimmed hedges, lazy dogs on front porches. The kind of place where people wave without knowing your name. For the past 6 years, it's been my home. Nothing much ever happens here. Until one day, it did. It started 5 years ago, when Mr. Raymond, my next-door neighbor, knocked on doors with trembling hands and red, swollen eyes. His 14-year-old son, Noah, had vanished. Just like that. No warning, no sound, no goodbye. The entire town was shaken. Flyers were stapled to telephone poles. Local news trucks lined the streets. The woods behind our neighborhood were combed through by volunteers and dogs, but nothing. Not a shoe. Not a scrap of clothing. Just gone. My wife and I did what we could. We brought meals, offered rides, stood in silent support when words felt useless. Over time, the visits stopped. The town moved on. But the Raymonds didn't. You could see it in their eyes. His wife, Linda, who used to garden every morning, barely left the house. And Mr. Raymond's chatty and upbeat had turned into a hollow version of himself. Nervous, distant, always glancing over his shoulder like someone was following him. After a while, nobody really talked about Noah anymore. The case went cold, no new leads. And in a way, we all let it fade into the fog that hangs over this town like a secret. But I never forgot. Something about it always felt off. Like there was a piece missing, and someone didn't want it found. I told myself it was just grief, just the way trauma twists a man's soul. Until the night Mr. Raymond asked to borrow a shovel. That's when everything began to unravel. It was just after dusk when I heard the knock. 3 slow raps on the front door. When I opened it, Mr. Raymond was standing there. His face looked thinner than I remembered, pale beneath the porch light. He gave me a weak smile, forced, and asked if he could borrow a shovel. I didn't hesitate. Of course. Hang on. As I walked to the garage, something about his voice replayed in my head. It had cracked slightly, like he'd been crying, or hadn't spoken to anyone in days. I grabbed my best shovel, the heavy steel, one I only used for serious digging, and handed it over. Appreciate it, he muttered. I just gotta fix something in the backyard. I'll return it tomorrow. No eye contact. No small talk. He turned and disappeared into the darkness behind his house. At first I didn't think much of it, but then I noticed something odd. He hadn't brought a flashlight. No porch light either. Just him, alone, walking into a pitch-black yard with a shovel. I closed the door and went back inside, but my mind was restless. Something gnawed at me, something I couldn't name. So I walked upstairs and stood by our bedroom window, the one with a clear view of Mr. Raymond's backyard. That's when I saw him. He was digging. Hard. The soil here is thick, full of roots and clay, but he was going at it like his life depended on it. The hole was already wide, far too wide for a tree or garden project. The longer I watched, the more uncomfortable I felt. His movements were frantic, desperate, his breath visible in the cold air. He wasn't planting something. He was burying or unburying something. I stared for several minutes, torn between curiosity and dread. Eventually, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe it was just an old compost pit, or he was replacing a septic line. But then, something snapped inside me. I grabbed my backup shovel and headed over. If he needed help, I'd offer it. If not, maybe I could at least find out what was going on. As I stepped into his backyard, I called out, "Hey, Mr. Raymond? Thought I'd give you a hint." He froze. Slowly, he turned toward me, His eyes were wild like a startled animal's. He walked straight toward me, dropping my shovel with a loud clatter on the grass. "No," he said. "No, I got it. Please. Just leave." I laughed nervously. "It's no big deal. He raised his hand like he was warning me. "Allow you to use that shovel in my yard." His voice was low, firm. It wasn't a request, it was a command. Then he pointed at the gate like I was some kind of stray dog. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The air between us felt heavy, off. I backed away without another word, feeling the hairs on my arms rise. When I got home, I went straight back to the window. He was still digging, this time slower, more methodical, like he knew I was watching. At one point, he stopped and looked up, not at the sky, not at the trees, but directly at my window. Our eyes locked. I tried to step away casually, but my heart was pounding. I didn't sleep that night, and I had no idea then that this was only the beginning. That night, I kept the bedroom window open. Part of me hoped he'd finished whatever he was doing. The other part, the darker part, wanted to know more. At 1:32 a.m., I heard it. Thud, thud, scrape. The unmistakable sound of a shovel breaking ground echoed through the cold air. I crept out of bed, careful not to wake my wife, and peered through the window. But the fog had rolled in thick. I couldn't see a thing, so I did something I'm still not sure was brave or just incredibly stupid. I grabbed a jacket and stepped outside. The air was sharp, wet. My socks soaked through as I tiptoed across the dewy grass to the side fence. I peeked over, and there he was. Mr. Raymond, still digging. This time, slower, steadier. His back was turned, and he hadn't seen me. I ducked down, heart racing. After a few minutes, he wiped his forehead, leaned on the shovel, and turned toward the house. Then, without a word, he went inside. Now was my chance. I climbed the fence and dropped silently onto the soft earth of his yard. The hole was deeper than I'd thought, at least 4 feet, and at the bottom, something stuck out. A corner of a black plastic bag, slick with damp soil. I stared at it. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of there, but my legs wouldn't move. I kept glancing from the bag to the house, from the house to the bag. I took one slow step forward, and then a sound. The back door creaked open. I bolted, climbed the fence, fell into my yard, scrambled inside, and pressed my back to the door. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Not because I saw something move in the bag, but because I didn't. When I opened my eyes the next morning, sunlight was already pouring through the curtains. I jumped out of bed, barely remembering falling asleep. I didn't bother with breakfast. I went straight to the window. What I saw made my stomach twist. The hole was gone. The patch of dirt where Mr. Raymond had been digging for hours was now perfectly level, covered in fresh soil, flattened like nothing had ever happened. But it wasn't just the ground that caught my eye. His SUV, the same one I'd seen parked in his driveway for years, was now on the street, facing the opposite direction. The front tires were muddy. The paint along the bottom was spattered with dried dirt, like it had been driven through some back road. That car had been somewhere, and it had taken something with it. I watched for a long time, hoping, maybe even praying, that Mr. Raymond would step outside, that he'd wave, smile, say something neighborly, but he didn't. He never even opened the curtains. I decided to walk by later that afternoon, just to test the waters. I figured I'd ask for the shovel back. Casual, normal. But as soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I saw his blinds move. Just a little, like someone was peeking through. I froze, and then the blinds snapped shut. I didn't knock. I didn't wave. I turned around and walked home with my heart thudding in my ears. That night, I checked the window again. Lights off, curtains drawn. The yard looked untouched. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been removed from that hole. Not buried. Removed. I kept thinking about that garbage bag. Its shape, the way it seemed to bulge in places, the way it sat, just barely covered in soil, like it had been buried once already, and then dug up. The thought hit me like ice down my spine. What if it was Noah? What if, all these years later, he'd been right there, just a few feet away from where I stood every day? And what if Raymond knew that I'd seen? What if that's why he looked up at my window? I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was all just speculation, just paranoia. But then something happened that made me realize this wasn't just my imagination. It was far from over. A few days passed. I kept expecting Mr. Raymond to come by, maybe with my shovel, maybe with an apology, maybe just something. But he didn't. He avoided me. Every time I left the house, I'd feel it, the weight of someone watching me, the kind of feeling that sinks into your skin. I'd look toward his house, toward those pale gray curtains, still closed, still silent, until that Wednesday afternoon. It was around 3 p.m. I had just made coffee and walked upstairs. The sun was hitting everything just right, bright and soft, like the calm before a storm. I glanced out the window, more out of habit than anything. And there he was, Mr. Raymond, standing perfectly still behind the glass of his second-floor window, staring at me, not blinking, not moving, just watching. My blood turned cold. I stepped back, instinctively, but I didn't break eye contact. Neither did he. His face didn't show anger or fear, just blankness. Like he wasn't looking at me, but through me. Like he already knew I'd seen something I shouldn't have. Then, slowly, without breaking eye contact, he reached up and pulled the curtain shut. I stood there for a long time, unsure what to think. Should I tell someone? The police? My wife? But what would I say? That I loaned my neighbor a shovel and saw him digging a hole? That I saw a garbage bag and now he won't look me in the eye? It all sounds like a bad dream, but it wasn't. It still isn't. Because every night now, before bed, I check the window, not to see if he's digging. I check to see if he's looking back. Sometimes I think I see the curtain twitch, just slightly, just enough. And sometimes, when I walk by his house, I swear I hear footsteps just inside the door, matching mine. Like someone is always one room away, always listening, always waiting. And the worst part? My shovel never came back. I've lived in 3 houses in my life. 2 with my family, 1 on my own. But the one that still creeps into my dreams was the first one. We spent the first 15 years of my life in a quiet town called Fairfield, Colorado. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens till it does. Our house was small, tucked near the end of a sleepy cul-de-sac. Most of the neighbors kept to themselves. So did we. Except for the kids next door. There were 2 of them, Colton and Jared. Brothers. About my age. But in 15 years of living there, I think I only talked to them maybe once or twice. They were strange. They never played outside. Never joined in with the other neighborhood kids. You'd only catch glimpses of them at dusk, walking down the sidewalk in matching jackets, or staring blankly from behind their upstairs window. My younger brother Mason was 5 years younger than me. He always said there was something weird about Colton and Jared. Something off. I used to laugh it off. But that changed the summer we were moving. We were a month away from leaving Fairfield for good. My parents had packed half the garage. The realtor had already started scheduling visits. And for once, the air felt a little lighter in that house. Then, one afternoon, while Mason and I were shooting hoops in the driveway, Colton came over. Out of nowhere. He just walked right up. No smile, no greeting, and asked, "Is it true you guys are moving?" I remember pausing mid-dribble, surprised. I said yes. He didn't react, just stared. Then he said, "You should come out to the creek with us tomorrow. We're shooting BB guns. It'll be fun." I said sure, without thinking much of it. He turned to leave, then glanced at Mason. "He can come too," he said. if he's not scared. That night, I had a hard time sleeping, and I didn't know why. But something in Colton's voice, the way he said, if he's not scared, made me feel like this wasn't just a casual invitation. It felt more like a test. The next day felt weird. You know that feeling you get before something goes wrong? Like the air is too still. Like you're hearing a sound that isn't really there. That was me sitting on the edge of my bed, lacing up my sneakers, pretending this was just another boring Saturday. Around 5:30, Colton and Jared showed up. No knock, no call, just standing at the edge of the driveway like shadows. They were dressed head to toe in camo. Real stuff boots, jackets, even gloves. And they were carrying a duffel bag, heavy, long, slung over Jared's shoulder like it was no big deal. "We're ready," Colton said flatly. Mason looked at me. I looked back, and we followed. We didn't tell our parents. We didn't leave a note. We just walked. The four of us made our way down the street, past the gas station, across the edge of the tree line, and into the wood-stored Brushwood Creek. Nobody talked. Nobody laughed. And with every step, that sinking feeling in my gut got worse. When we finally reached the riverbank, Colton dropped the duffel bag into the dirt. The echo of it landing made Mason flinch. Jared walked over to a tree, snapped a branch, and threw it into the water hard. No reason, just violence. Colton knelt down, unzipped the bag, and pulled out what I thought were BB guns. He handed one to me, one to Mason. Then, he looked me dead in the eye. "These aren't toys," he said. I laughed nervously. "Yeah, okay." But he didn't smile, didn't blink. "I mean it, they're real guns." Then Jared reached into the bag, pulled out another rifle longer, heavier, and started shooting. Not into the air, not at a target, but at the trees. The real trees across the creek. Bullets snapped through leaves and bark. The echo cracked through the woods like fireworks, and birds exploded from the branches, screaming into the sky. Mason was frozen. I felt my stomach drop. I grabbed the gun from Mason's hands and carefully placed both rifles back in the bag. "We're not doing this," I said. Colton didn't move. Jared turned, the gun still in his hands. I pulled Mason by the arm and started walking, fast. Behind us, one of them shouted something, a curse. Ugly, loud, sharp. But we didn't turn back. Not once. By the time we got home, the sun was almost gone. Dinner was on the table. My parents were laughing about something on television. Mason didn't say a word. Neither did I, because I knew something for sure now. Those boys weren't normal. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Every gust of wind brushing the windows made my chest tighten. I kept replaying Jared pulling the trigger. The sound of the bullets. The way Colton looked at me like I'd failed a test I never asked to take. I finally drifted off sometime after midnight. But I didn't stay asleep. At 2:37 a.m., I woke up with a start. Not because of a nightmare, not because of noise, but because of air, cold air, hitting my face. The kind that only comes from a wide open window. I sat up slowly, confused. My bedroom window was fully open. Wide. I never sleep with it open. The curtains were swaying gently. And then, I felt it. Pressure. Something hard, cold, pressing against the back of my head. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then came a whisper. Right behind me. "Shh." I froze. My heart was punching through my chest. My eyes were wide. And I knew that voice. It was Colton. He leaned in close. I could feel his breath. I could smell the sweat, the dirt. "If you tell anyone, especially my dad." He paused. "I'll come back, and I'll hurt you. All of you." I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat was dry. My whole body was locked in place. Finally, in a voice that didn't even sound like mine, I whispered, "Okay." Then he pressed whatever it was, I think it was the barrel of a gun, against my head. Just for a second. And then he was gone. He slipped through the window like smoke, and the only sound left in the room was the soft ripple of the curtain. I sat there, paralyzed, for what felt like hours. Eventually, I closed the window, locked it, shoved a chair in front of it, then crawled under the covers and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. I didn't tell my parents. Didn't even tell Mason, because now I knew what they were capable of. And I knew one thing for sure: they were watching. After that night, nothing felt safe anymore. I kept the window locked, double-checked it every night. I even moved my bed away from the wall, just so I could see the door. But it didn't matter, because they didn't need to come in again. They were already watching. It started small. I'd glance out my bedroom window and see movement of curtain twitching next door. Sometimes just a shadow. Sometimes it was clearer. Jared staring, arms folded, expression blank. Other nights it was Colton. He wouldn't look away. He'd just stand there, still, silent, watching. Mason started seeing it too. He told me, quietly, wondering over cereal, "Colton was outside my window last night." I nearly dropped my spoon. "Are you sure?" Mason nodded. He waved. I told him it was probably just a dream, but we both knew better. The closer we got to moving day, the worse it got. One night, around 11 p.m., someone scratched at our back door. Not knocked. Scratched. Long, slow, dragging sounds like nails on old wood. By the time I got there and turned on the porch light, nobody was there. Just dirt. And a dead bird lying on the doormat. Another time, Mason came into my room, pale as a ghost. "There was a knock at my window," he whispered. He was shaking. I opened the blinds. They ran away, but one of them left a drawing. I followed him. Taped to the outside glass was a piece of notebook paper. On it was a stick figure, a smiley face, and the words, "See you soon." I tore it down and crumpled it, hands trembling. Still, we said nothing to our parents. What would we say? That 2 neighborhood boys were stalking us, leaving us drawings and scratching our doors? They'd think we were imagining things. We just had to make it one more week. 7 days. 7 more nights. But each night dragged like a lifetime. Every creak, every thump, every distant footstep. We thought it might be them. Watching, waiting, counting down the days. It was the final night. Boxes were taped shut. The moving truck was scheduled for the morning. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I remember telling myself, just make it through this one night, and it's over. But I should have known. At 1:14 a.m., I woke to the sound of glass. A crack, short and sharp, like a pebble hitting a window. I sat up. My room was dark, quiet, still. Then I heard laughter. Low, raspy. Just outside. I crawled to the window and peeked through the blinds. And there he was. Colton, standing in our yard, staring straight at me, with something in his hand. He slowly raised it, pointed it at my window. It looked like a gun. I dropped to the floor, heart hammering. For a second, I thought that was it. This was how it ended. But then I heard them laughing again. 2 voices this time. Running, fading into the night. I crawled back up, still shaking. There was a dent in the siding under my window. And on the grass, a plastic toy gun snapped in half. Just a joke. Another twisted prank. The next morning, as we drove away from the only home I'd ever known, I turned to look one last time, and I saw Jared, in the window of their house, watching, not smiling, not waving, just watching. And in that moment, I knew they never meant to hurt us. Not really. They just wanted us to remember them. Forever. And now I have to ask, what would you have done? Would you have looked in that hole, or closed the blinds and never asked again? Would you have followed those boys into the woods, or stayed home and listened to your gut? Sometimes, it's not the supernatural that haunts us, it's the people we thought we knew. Let me know in the comments. Which story unsettled you more? And have you ever had a neighbor that just didn't feel right? If you enjoyed tonight's stories, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more real-feeling horror every week. Thanks for watching, and keep your curtains closed tonight.